Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. In this video I want to talk about why the Squier Classic Vibe Telecaster is the best guitar I ever bought. But more than that, I want to talk about my experience of guitar buying generally and how just because an instrument costs more doesn't mean you're going to love it more. I'll walk you through all the guitars I have to hand, so let's start with another blonde, my OG, my made in Korea Squier Standard Telecaster. This was my first serious guitar. My mum gave me 50 quid for Christmas when I was 14 and I bought it from a friend in a bit of a sad state. So I spent another 30 quid fixing it up with a new nut and a new pick guard. But after that, this is the guitar that really got me started, including my first recordings and even some paid gigs. It's not the best guitar in the world, the pickups are weak and it doesn't feel too great to play either, but honestly, for the hours and hours of playing time it's had, it's probably the best 80 quid I ever spent. So having owned the Squier, at some point the real Fender had to come. I never actually intended to buy this guitar. I bought an amp I didn't like and tried to return it, but the shop would only let me have an exchange, so I picked out this made in Mexico Fender Standard Strat instead. It soon became clear that it massively outperformed both the Epiphone Les Paul and Floyd Rose Jackson I had at the time, so I parted ways with those and the Strat became my main guitar for the next 8 years, and you can see it has the wear to show for it. This guitar is incredibly functional, has higher output pickups which are great for rock and blues and is pretty slick to play. But despite all of this, I've never really loved it, it's just been a tool to me. Then one day a guitar came along that I did really love, my Les Paul Goldtop. A friend of mine bought this guitar new and for some reason really couldn't get on with it, to the extent of having to give up on it midway through a gig. He brought it to me to see if I could work out what was wrong with it. Well, there was nothing wrong with it to me. In fact, I thought it was amazing. Lightweight and beautiful to play, it's got plenty of top end, but still with that classic Les Paul girth and sustain. So after playing the guitar for a couple of weeks, I decided I had to buy it. I called my friend to make an offer, to which he said, I was just going to let you keep it anyway. It was amazingly kind of him, but I couldn't just accept it. So we agreed I'd send him an Epiphone Les Paul and a very nice Fender jazz bass in exchange. I love this guitar, and if I could only keep one, this would be it. Next up then comes the Classic Vibe. The Les Paul was now my main guitar, but I wanted a Tele for variation when recording, and my old Korean Squier just didn't cut it. In the good old days, before Brexit killed imports and murdered the exchange rate, I got this guitar for £250 from Bax in the Netherlands. For the money I paid, this guitar was incredible, but more on that later. Meanwhile, I still crave some classic Strat tones as well, but my old Sunburst Strat was out on long-term loan to a friend. When Fender released the Player Series, they seemed to have solved everything I didn't love about my old standard model. They glossed the fingerboard, got rid of that nasty 80s style logo, added Alnico pickups, and most importantly, this Typal blue colour was just gorgeous. At £519, this was hardly a super cheap guitar, and whilst the fundamentals are great, there are details that let it down. There's pinging from the nut, the plastic parts are a bit ropey in places, the fret ends could be smoother, and whilst testing out others, I saw quite a few with finish issues around the neck joint. Although far from perfect, I do like this guitar, and it certainly sounds great and does all the classic Strat tones very, very well. But of course, you can never have too many Strats, and when lockdown came and internet shopping became the #1 national pastime, I was scouring the guitar shops for my next target. Up came this American original 60s Strat in candy apple red, X-Display reduced from £1,600 to £1,100. I bought it blind, knowing I could return it if needed, but when it came, there was nothing X-Display about it. It was absolutely mint condition and a truly beautiful guitar. So what's not to love? Well, actually, it doesn't have quite the same clarity as my Blue Player Strat, nor the same power as my Sunburst Standard. It's also a little prone to choking out on the higher frets, and having to take the neck off to adjust the truss rod is a ball ache, especially as the truss rod isn't too responsive on it. Beautiful though it may be, the reality is it's still playing second fiddle to the Mexican Player Series as my #1 Strat, despite the higher price tag. So back to the Classic Vibe Telly. Could this £250 Squier really be the best guitar I've ever bought? Well, I say 100% yes. It's clearly not the best guitar I own, but how I feel about it really comes down to expectations. For such a small price, I got a classic guitar with a super smooth maple neck with even some flame in it and no sharp frets whatsoever. I got a pine body as per some of the original Fenders with a lovely grain showing through a classic blonde finish. I got subtly voiced Alnico pickups with plenty of bite and grunt from the bridge position, and I got those great tuners where the string goes down the hole and an ashtray bridge with brass saddles. If this guitar was 3 or 4 times the price, you wouldn't question it. Is it perfect? No, it's a little weighty and the cheap electronics do let it down a little. But when I opened the box and saw what I bought and then plugged in and played, I was amazed. I had 0 regrets and 0 disappointment. That's never really been the case for any other guitar, because the cheaper ones always had issues, and the higher price ones, well, the higher the price, the closer to perfection I expect. And in truth, perfect guitars just don't exist. So for £250, the Squier Classic Vibe is the best guitar buying experience I've ever had. Now, the guitars you've seen in this video are far from the complete list, just what I had with me at the point of recording. The really bad guitars, of course, didn't stay with me long, and I'll give special mentions to an Epiphone Black Beauty where the high E string kept getting stuck under a fret that wasn't installed properly, the Fender USA Highway 1 that buzzed everywhere and just had 0 life in the sound, and of course, the Jackson I mentioned earlier with a Floyd Rose. Word to the wise, never ever ever get a Floyd Rose unless you dive bomb every other note, because you'll spend more time setting up than you ever will playing. When I look back at all the guitars I bought over the years, I'm very aware of a simple truth, that the materialistic pursuit of more things never brings true happiness, even if those things are really nice guitars. But in contrast, actually spending time playing, regardless of the price of the guitar, and seeing myself grow as a musician has, and always will, bring me immense joy and happiness in my life.